For the past 11 years, firefighter Gerald Alston has been battling with the town of Brookline. His issues with the town started when then Commander Paul Pender left a racist voicemail on his cell phone, which included the N-word. Alston filed a complaint. Brookline's Board of Selectmen ultimately took up the complaint and voted to give the commander who left the message just a 2-shift suspension, a slap on the wrist at most. Afterward, he would go on to be promoted in the fire department twice, but for Alston, the decade that followed looked very different. He was placed on leave in 2013 after the town claimed he made threatening comments at work. 2 years later, he filed a federal discrimination lawsuit alleging a culture of racism and retaliation within the department. And a year after that, in 2016, Brookline fired Alston, saying he refused to comply with conditions for his return to work. Alston appealed their decision with the state's Civil Service Commission, which ordered him to be reinstated with back pay in 2019, arguing the department, quote, actively promoted a false narrative that painted Alston as a paranoid employee who simply couldn't move on from racist comments. But Brookline kept fighting, taking the case up to the state's Supreme Judicial Court, which ruled in Alston's favor yesterday, arguing that the town was to blame, writing in part, considering Pender's racist comment, the retaliatory actions and the town's continuously insensitive and inappropriate, if not outright discriminatory responses, the commission's findings support the conclusion that the town caused Alston's unfitness, preventing his return to work. Now, Alston's federal discrimination suit is the only battle that remains, and this time he's got a new supporter. Former congressional candidate Jesse Mermel, who was a member of the Brookline Board of Selectmen, now the Select Board, back in 2010, and voted in favor of the painfully modest 2-shift suspension. But in 2019, she publicly apologized, telling the Globe's Adrienne Walker her vote was, quote, a massive personal failure. Gerald Alston and Jesse Mermel, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Gerald, starting with you, 11 long years of fighting. What did it feel like when you heard the decision from the Supreme Judicial Court?
It was a breath of fresh air. You know, for years, I just was trying to get the point across. I wasn't trying to be combative. You know, I just was trying to be considered a human being. And the fact that the board didn't even consider that was hurtful. But after this decision, it feels good. It feels real good.
I know the elected leaders in Brookline were not with you. Were any of your fellow firefighters supportive of you through this decade-long battle, Gerald?
In the beginning, very few. But as of now, I can honestly say 2. I don't know if anyone feels the same way as I do, but being in that environment, you don't want to be on the opposite side, or you'll be in the position that I'm in. So I don't know what kind of support system they have. So maybe they just didn't want to be ridiculed or considered to be on the wrong side.
You know, Jesse, you did something politicians almost never do, is you apologized for a vote you took. If you don't mind, I'd like to read a little bit from your Facebook posting in 2019. Well, I can't speak for the town or for my former colleagues on the Select Board. I'll say this for myself. I failed Mr. Alston. I'm deeply sorry. I failed to prioritize justice over risk mitigation. I lacked the courage to say the consequences potentially faced as a result of adopting a more aggressive disciplinary strategy paled in comparison to the consequences borne by Mr. Alston in the wake of what he had endured. Why'd you decide to do that?
A host of reasons. In early 2019, the civil service ruling that you referenced in the opening to this segment came out, and I had long felt deeply uncomfortable with the way Gerald's case had played out. I left the board in early first week of 2013 and had kept an eye on this and was uncomfortable and upset, but did not speak out. And when I read that 80-plus page civil service ruling, something about seeing all of this in one place turned my stomach. And then shortly thereafter, the town appealed the ruling that had been in Gerald's favor. And to me, that was the much too late, I fully own, straw that broke the camel's back. And there was a vote coming up at town meeting to apologize to Gerald on behalf of the town, and I felt that it was appropriate, again, belatedly, for me to speak out and own what my role had been in the early days of this complete mess, to understate it, and to personally apologize to Gerald and to his family, and to call on the town to join me in doing that.
By the way, and just to be clear, since I'm not an expert on civil service commissions and these sort of things, Jesse, in all these intervening years, the select board, or whatever it was called at that particular time, could have decided to change course here and show support for Gerald Alston, correct?
Yes, and I'll be clear, Raul Fernandez, who's a current member of the select board and has been for several years, has been steadfast and vocal in his support for Gerald and call for justice. Unfortunately, he is in a minority.
You know, Gerald, you reached out. I read in Adrian Walker's fine column, I think it was there that I read, that after that apology, you reached out to Jesse. Why?
Well, you know, my parents play an intricate part of my life. They've always been there to support me in several ways that I can't even count. One of the things my mother said to me growing up was, there's not one perfect person in this world, not one. We're all imperfect by nature, all of us. And we all make mistakes. But it's not about the mistakes you make, it's about what you do after that determines who you are. And I took from what Jessie said and how she presented herself as she understood she made a mistake. And I wanted to see if it was just Jessie saying this to pursue another aspect of her life and pretend that she was telling the truth, or this who she truly was. And I've come to realize that this is who Jessie is. So I respect what she did, and I thank her for doing it.
You know, Jesse, this is not the first instance, you know, of racism from officialdom in Brookline. It was just a couple of years ago, I interviewed a couple of black police officers who had said they were racially discriminated against. Ultimately, there was a settlement. Then we moved right across the border to Boston, and we know that there were findings that white police officers are rewarded and promoted while black police officers are punished and disciplined. So my question is the racism so baked into our governments that it's only juries and judges that can rescue us, or do we have an ability to rescue ourselves?
First, let me say that Gerald Alston is someone who has shown me more grace and generosity than almost anyone in my entire life. He is a remarkable man, and it is an honor for me to call him a friend. And I am here today solely to support him.
Great.
I think that racism is baked into every fabric of American society, Jim. It's not just government. And I've only been a part of Brookline town government, so I can only speak for that. But what I'll say is that as individuals and as institutions, it can be incredibly painful and hard to acknowledge that you have been a part of wrongdoing, that you have been a part of systemic racism when that flies in the face of the image that you have of yourself, of your community. And we have to force ourselves, particularly we as white people, to understand that that pain pales in comparison to the pain that Gerald and other Black and brown and Asian and indigenous people have experienced. And it is up to us to do that work in government and other positions of leadership and just as human beings walking down the street. And I don't think that we will be able to become the community, the society, the individuals that we say we aspire to be until we do that hard work and that learning.
Gerald, we only have 30 seconds left. Your decision from the SJC, a jury in Minnesota, a few other modest lights of brightness in terms of justice. Are you hopeful about the future?
I was hopeful about the future when these protests started. This generation did something that I haven't seen in my lifetime. And they didn't just protest in the United States, they protested across all over the world.
Yep.
So this generation is the start of something that we need to really be prepared for. This change is coming, regardless of whether we want it to or not.
Well, I'm glad there was change in your situation with the SJC the other day. I wish you a lot of luck in the future. Jesse, thank you for joining us tonight as well, and I hope to see you both again soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.